Well, this afternoon we're here at the Osage Center in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, at the Heartland Festival of Books on the Mississippi. It's a book and craft festival sponsored by the Heartland Writers Guild. And this time we're visiting with Tim Morgan, who's the author of a book entitled The Enneagram of Miracles. And Tim, I'll just ask you, what was your background for writing this book?
I was ordained as a New Thought pastor in 2005 in St. Louis, a Soul Esteem Center. And before that, I had churches here in Cape Girardeau, and my studies led me into the deeper aspects or the esoteric aspects of Christianity. Mm-hmm. And that led me to the decoding of the Lord's Prayer. It was an ancient code to be broken, and being a hypnotist also for 25 years, this whetted my appetite to study the archetypes of humanity through the Lord's Prayer.
Wow. Okay. So what exactly then is the Enneagram of Miracles about?
The Enneagram of Miracles is a marriage of two books. It is a marriage of the Enneagram published by Houghton and Mifflin, and the A Course in Miracles, published by the Foundation for Inner Peace. What I did is I took the 9 personality archetypes listed in the Enneagram, healthy, average, and unhealthy, and I took the readings of A Course in Miracles and took all the issues in the Course in Miracles that had to do with the personality archetypes, and I placed these issues in order for the perfectionist, helper giver, superachiever, artistic temperament, observer, trooper questioner, Epicurean, controller, and peacemaker. Healthy, average, and unhealthy of the healthy versions of the archetypes that are being taught at Stanford Medical School to psychiatrists today.
Okay. So these psychiatric archetypes, are they internationally recognized among all psychologists?
Absolutely, yes they are. Claudio Naranjo is a psychologist from South America who placed and informed all the psychiatric hospitals all over the planet of these archetypes. Originally, they were taught in Europe and America, but now they are being taught all over the world because they are international and universal archetypes. You might say there are 15 trillion people on the planet, but there truly are only 9.
Everybody falls into
They fall into one of the 9, yes.
You mentioned the New Thought Church or New Thought denomination.
Yes.
Expand on that a little bit.
Mary Baker Eddy created her church 3 years after the Civil War, and it was Christian Science Church. That church split out into 5 to 6 different denominations. And I am of the ilk of the Church of Religious Science. There were Unity Village in Kansas City was a split from Christian Science. Science of Mind is a split from Christian Science. The Jehovah's Witnesses is a split from the Christian Science. Then there is Church of Religious Science, and then Church of Religious Science International. Those were the splits from Mary Baker Eddy's church.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting. Well, who really developed the archetypes, or could we credit anyone for developing them?
This goes back older than the New Testament. In my studies, I have found that the archetypes of the Lord's Prayer were taught in Pharaoh's court, approximately 347 BC. This was picked up by the Desert Fathers, which were pre-Christian Jewish. And it was basically hidden esoteric information from the Desert Fathers until George Gurdjieff from Turkey, a philosopher in Turkey, came down to Arica, Chile, to a Jesuit seminary and revealed the code and broke the code to the Jesuits in 1968.
Wow, that's fascinating. How is the ego implied in archetypes?
The ego is a construction created by the psychologists that appeared on our shores here, Freud. Freud gave us the convention of the ego.
Oh, okay.
But the deeper parts of the character analysis and the games that those egos play is far older than that. And Carl Jung, a noted psychologist in America, was on his way to find those archetypes. He was very close to finding the archetypes. However, he passed away and missed the purity that was revealed in Arica, Chile, to those Jesuits.
Well, what does the ACIM teach about egos?
It teaches that we can only experience love without fear. It teaches that where fear exists, there is no love. And it actually goes further to say, where there is fear, nothing exists. And the only reality that the human can experience is love.
Well, are egos, do we see these in the Bible?
Yes. There is an author named Richard Rohr who is also a Catholic priest. He wrote the Enneagram of the Old and New Testament, and we find that for every Enneatype there is an Old Testament archetype that fulfills that. Adam would have been the perfectionist. Hosea was the helper giver. Abraham would have been the 3. Jacob was the 4. Isaac was the 5. Moses was the 6. David and Solomon both would have been the 7. The 8 escapes me just now, but the 9 is the gentleman that was swallowed up in a boat and spit on
Jonah.
Jonah was the 9. Thank you. We could all say that Herod would have been the 8.
So there are characters within the Bible that represent all of these.
Oh yes, and that's the Old Testament essentially. And each and every time Jesus was in conversation in the New Testament with any individual in the New Testament, he obeyed the guidelines of the archetype he was speaking with.
Well, that was kind of my next question was, is Jesus important to these archetypes?
Yes.
Revealing them.
rather than seminaries defending the manuscripts and their authenticities, there is another aspect of the authenticity, and that is the scribal coding of the New Testament shows a purity of a conversational type between the archetypes. When Jesus was speaking with the woman at the well, he was obeying the perfect archetype of speaking with a four, or the artistic temperament. There is no time that he broke the rules of speaking to an individual by breaking the aspect of their personality. He was directly speaking to their archetype, which is a matter of beauty, in my opinion.
Well, what about psychosis? Is there psychosis in the Bible? Who goes psychotic?
The closest we would get to someone approaching psychosis would have been Nebuchadnezzar, when he went into a depression and went, at least allegedly, would go into a field eating like animals with long fingernails, and where Daniel spared him. We have no other aspect of psychosis in Scripture that I know of.
Very interesting. Well, you mentioned that about the Egyptians related to that. Do Jews teach archetypes?
Yes. Today, when a Jewish scribe studies the Jewish Sephirot, it is perfectly synchronous with the Enneagram. They have every aspect of the Enneagram and the archetypes in the Jewish Sephirot. One difference is that in the Christian Enneagram, we have God in the center of all these faces, and we have then considered 9 faces of God. In the Jewish Sephirot, God is separate outside that box.
Wow.
And it's a difference in the term whole. When you are whole, in Christian terms, we are with God. When we are whole, we realize the relationship with God in Jewish terms.
Oh, okay.
So there's a separation, and here there's an inclusion.
Okay. But the archetypes would be the
Are
same.
the same.
Okay. I believe Helen Schuckman's the author of A Course in
Yes.
Miracles. Tell us a little bit about her background, credentials.
Helen Schuckman had a PhD in psychology, and she taught physicians, MDs, psychology at Columbia Medical School.
Columbia.
She was a non-practicing Jew, and her advisors were upset with the department. The interdepartmental goings-ons and competitions between people within departments, and one department head said there has to be a better way. So what she did, she had herself placed in a hypnotic trance, and she wrote this entire book in a hypnotic trance.
Wow, while she was under hypnosis?
Yes, she was under
Wow.
hypnosis, wrote this book, and in psychological literature, this is considered transpersonal psychology, and it stands with British poets Keats and Yeats, who both wrote their poetry in a hypnotic trance.
Wow. That's interesting.
What I loved about her book is the nuance, the wisdom, the other considerations of aspects of personalities, which I consider esoteric. And what I did then is took all her writings and I separated them into the healthy, average, and unhealthy of all 9 archetypes because they were all present in her book.
Well, you mentioned these authors wrote these things under hypnosis. What is hypnosis, and when did it start? How old is hypnosis?
We teach the 6 stages of hypnosis. And for each individual that goes to bed every night of their life to get 8 hours of sleep, they pass through 6 stages of sleep just to get to bed and have a good night's sleep.
Okay.
Hypnosis, when it is done commercially, we stop you at the 3rd state of sleep, which is rapid eye movement, where you're half awake and you're half asleep. And it is considered a state of heightened suggestibility. And at that state is where we give our suggestions to be carried out post-hypnotically. So for a stop smoker, I give suggestions that are aversive therapy to make them absolutely hate the tobacco product. And that hatred of the tobacco product would be carried out after the hypnosis session. They carry that wisdom and learning with them to act upon.
Well, I think that's interesting. I never realized the different stages of sleep.
Yes.
And how hypnosis relates to that. What's the term temple sleeps?
Temple sleep. In Old Testament times, the only healing buildings were temples where people would lay on the floor, be in a 3rd state of sleep, relaxed, while the priest, who was called the temple sleep, would address the deity and would vanguard the healing of these people on the floor. The Oracle of Delphi in Greece was one of these oracles. They were also called oracles. They were called temple sleeps. The Oracle of Asclepius in Rome on the island, right now it's called the island of Asclepius. It is in the middle of the Tiber. The Oracle of Thebes in Egypt. There was an oracle in Turkey, which wound up to be the 7th Church of Rome. And the ancient Olympics were held at that site, and underneath were springs that went into the caves, and that oracle delivered the healings of courage and strength to the Olympiads. The other oracle of healing was the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem.
Well, this, as far as the Course in Miracles, are there churches that use that? And where would they be located?
Yes, they are over the world. There are more Course in Miracles churches in Mexico than any country of the world. The second number of churches would be Holland, but they are in every country. This book has been translated in every language with the exception of Arabic.
Well, is there, like we have a Bible concordance, is there something similar
Yes.
to that for A Course in Miracles?
Yes, there are 2 Bible concordances for A Course in Miracles, and it gives all the biblical references that are used in this book. One is a very tall, hardcover burgundy book, and one is blue, looks just about like this, a little fatter. Both are concordances for the Bible.
Okay. Very interesting. Well, let's go back to the Enneagram and who developed that for the Western world.
I would say the Catholic nuns, after this was revealed in Arica, Chile to the Jesuits, the nuns took this over and would have Enneagram workshops in Catholic churches. And the way they ran this is that they would have 9 points around the church where they had chairs, empty chairs, and they would read off the character archetypes, and people who felt that they were that archetype would sit in their chair.
And each one of these represented one of the
Exactly,
archetypes.
one of the archetypes, yes. And then these nuns would go to this group of this chair and listen to everybody's story and everybody's experience. And they consolidated all the experiences to validate that truly there are 9 personality archetypes.
Well, is there some application of this? Why is this important?
There is a Gnostic Christian saying, know thyself. And the Enneagram gives you that opportunity to not only discover yourself and to know yourself, but it can give you guidelines as to whether you're leaving the healthy level to the average level, or if you're leaving the average level to the unhealthy level, where you are bordering on the psychotic. And it would help you return to the healthy level and know what you were like when you were a healthy archetype. One other aspect that is being used from the Enneagram is the screenwriting industry. The screenwriting industry uses the Enneagram now to purify the scripting of the characters in the movie. So if the play or the movie or the script calls for a 2 here, an 8 or a 7, then the actors are apprised of what is expected of this archetype and not to cross over into somebody they're not. And with a therapist, as for therapists, I train my hypnotherapists to know this Enneagram type so that they can keep their issues out of the way of the client and to read the client perfectly and allow them to reveal themselves into the archetype that they truly are.
Well, I think that's interesting related to the movie scripts, that it could keep them from having the character do something that they really wouldn't be doing.
Correct.
And makes it more realistic.
Correct.
And accurate.
Correct.
As far as hypnotists, what does someone hire hypnotists? What's the employment?
Hypnotists are used to solve crimes. The Chowchilla crime in California is the best example, where a busload of children were hijacked by an individual and hidden under a pile of gravel. The original driver was able to break away, and that driver was hypnotized to locate the bus and to identify the hijacker. That put hypnosis on the map in America. However, I personally have done bank robbery witnesses, murder witnesses, child molestation witnesses. We proverbially do the stop smoking, the weight loss, pain removal, pain reduction, and prepare people for painless child delivery. So I do all the manner of the phobias: fear of water, fear of heights, fear of the dark, fear of spiders.
Okay. And so it can be used in solving crimes to
Yes.
help people, witnesses,
Yes.
have a clear recall of the
Yes,
events.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, do they ever teach hypnosis in medical school?
From 1958 to 1974, hypnosis and hypnotherapy was a required medical school subject, and it was an edict from the U.S. Congress in 1958. They mandated that hypnosis and hypnotherapy be taught in medical schools, so you could not be an MD or a DO graduated out of in those years without a thorough understanding of hypnosis and hypnotherapy, which really meant Congress demanded our physicians do no harm. No more slash, burn, and poison. Use a conservative do no harm therapy to train an individual out of a disorder without any medications at all.
Without putting in more chemicals.
Yes, in 1974 the laws changed. The lobbyists that own and determine the curriculum of those medical schools went to Congress and said, we are no longer going to train our physicians as hypnotherapists. So Congress then created a second law creating post-secondary schools of education as for hypnotists. I am a product of that legislation.
Okay.
I am a National Guild instructor.
Okay.
And when I train a hypnotherapist, I use the National Guild guidelines and I use medical school textbooks.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering, it can help with pain control. Is it ever used in relation to dentistry? Dental schools ever teach
Yes.
it, or dentists ever use it?
Dental schools will call that course hypnodontics or hypodontics. And they are trained to prepare the person in their chair to reduce discomfort or remove pain totally.
Well, Tim, this has all been really fascinating. If someone wanted to get your book, where would that be available?
I have this on Amazon.com.
Okay, all right.
The Enneagram of Miracles on
So
Amazon.com.
it's not hard to find.
It's not hard to find at all.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and here at the Heartland Festival of Books on Mississippi. And we've enjoyed it very much and wish you good luck for the rest of the festival and with your book.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.